That's easy. So I was raised in a Christian home, and my mom taught Sunday school with kids for years, and so did my dad. In fact, he taught with men's group while mom was teaching with the kids. And as I said, I grew up in the church down at Calvary Baptist down here in Evansville, and I was 11 years old, and we were at a one of those moments when you show up a little bit late for service, right? And Calvary had a balcony, and so we went up to the balcony, and in the balcony, the sermon unfolded, and there was the invitation, and that's when I felt the call of the Holy Spirit. It was that moment. And I recall being there, holding on to that pew in front of me like I was driving in white knuckle weather. It was one of those moments. And my mom leaned over and said, "Forrest, do you think you need to go forward?" And I said, "Oh, I think they're about finished." And she said, "Oh, I think they'll wait." And so I did go forward then. And it was a time when I have to tell you, I did not connect well with the youth in that place in that time. It just didn't work out well for me. So I was not real active through my high school years. It was when I was in college that I began to reconnect. And then Carol and I began to date. And when that happened, we met about 3 years after graduation from U of E, and we became active with the church at that point. And that was the point when I really started to reconnect and begin to do things there with the church. Served on a lot of committees, and as time passed, I guess it was mid '80s, early '80s, 1982. Carol and I got married, and we married down at Calvary, and that was great. A few years later, Matt came along. Matthew is our only son, and so we raised him there at the church as well. And in that time, just every committee you can imagine we were involved with, did a lot of work with youth. Uh, my testimony has to include an element that kind of is on the edge of all that, because when Matt was in second grade, we went to a PTA meeting, and a moment later I found that I was a Cub Master with a new Cub Scout pack. And I have to tell you, 3 months later we had 65 boys, and we always treated it as a ministry, always. Short time later, the church decided that they would go ahead and open a charter for a Boy Scout troop and then a venturing crew. And so we did all of that for 23 years. And in that time, always a ministry. Time passed, and we had a bunch of boys who made it through to the Eagle Scout rank, and 3 of those boys came to me individually within about a 6-month window and said, "Hey, would you officiate my wedding?" And that was kind of a wake-up call. I had been ordained a deacon in 1990, but that didn't qualify me to go officiate a wedding. So I talked to our deacons and our staff, and they said, "Well, we'll fix that for you." So they licensed me to the ministry in 2017, and that prompted me to do something else, which was to go back and pick up seminary degrees for masters and a PhD in Christian organizational leadership. All of those things so that as I came to retirement, I'd be able to do some consulting with churches and maybe help them through rough patches. Yeah, well, Carol and I met, as I said, about 3 years after we graduated from U of E. Didn't even know each other while we were in school. And we met on a CB radio. So how's that for something unique? Associated Press picked up that news item, and it went everywhere. We got all kinds of notes from people from other countries. And it was just funny how many people had seen that. And so that was pretty cool. Carol has been an incredible blessing. She is a rock. She is so great, and so she has had a number of jobs during our married life. We got married, as I said, in '82, and among those, 8 years on staff over at North Park Baptist Women and Children's Ministry. And so we've done a lot with children's ministries since before we were ever married. In fact, we looked it up the other day. It was 2 years before we got married that we were tapped individually and put into a group of 40 to 60 bus ministry kids saying, "Can you come in and help with the children?" And then the person who said that vanished. So we've had a lot of fun with that, but we continue to do a lot of work with Child Evangelism Fellowship, and those materials are just excellent. We've used them for years, 5 year through the Bible cycle, and we keep using the stuff. It's always new to the kids. I can tell you about Matt. I should do that. Matt was baptized down at Calvary, and then we moved over to North Park, and he was just amazing. He started leading in youth groups and doing things like that, and I had the pleasure of ordaining him as a deacon. So at North Park Baptist. So remarkable young man, just a powerhouse. He and his wife Mindy have been married now for a half dozen years. Oh man, my favorite memories at church always wrap around the ministry I'm most involved with. Well, so today that's Trail Life. Trail Life was born in January of 2014, and it has been a wild, hair-on-fire ride with it. I've taken boys to West Virginia for National Summer Adventure programs a couple of times, and to New Mexico for the same thing a couple of times, to Georgia. We've taken them to Walt Disney World. We've taken them so many regional trips I can't even begin to tell you. But I mean, the memories that wrap around all of those are memories like we were in New Mexico at Glorieta, and we were doing a campfire program one night, and one of the guys said, "What are we going to do? What are we going to do? How are we going to make this work?" And I said, "Well, I'll tell you what. We'll talk to staff and see if we can find a great spot." And they said, "Pulpit Rock is the place." And it was a boulder field straight up. And I said, "That's great." And then I realized that we had a boy in a wheelchair. And two of the staff came out. They were climbing instructors. They hooked onto that boy with climbing belts and took him in the wheelchair straight up that mountain. And that was an amazing experience. And the next day, to hear him simply thank those boys that had helped form a line that was a safety net all the way up and all the way down, amazing. I think of mobilizations where our boys have gone out on flood relief. The list just goes on and on. But they're all memories tied to the troop, tied as a ministry to the church. I've had the difficult situation of being through two churches that closed. And I think a lot of that had to do with a lack of strong biblical foundations for people. They need to have those as they come into the church and begin to serve. They need to understand some fundamental issues for the operation of the church, which leads to harmony, which leads to a greater opportunity to fulfill the Great Commission. And that would be the focus. Favorite Bible stories for me, there are so many. So it depends on where I am and what I'm doing. I've painted faces with the Christian Motorcyclist Organization for years. And I always ask, do you have a favorite Bible story? Can I tell you a favorite Bible story? And sadly, most do not. Only about 3 out of 10 in my record keeping can tell me a Bible story. And in fact, a lot of those get mixed up with Marvel and other things. They're not really Bible stories, right? But when it's been one of those challenge to boys kinds of days, I love to talk about David and Goliath. I love to talk about preparedness. I love to talk about the idea that you're going to go out there with a bag full of 5 stones, right? And yeah, we hear about David taking down Goliath with 1 stone. What gets missed is he had a bag with 4 more for his brothers. He was ready to go. So it was that ability to be ready. I can't tell you how many times we've been on canoe trips, and I've had a rough day on the water, and the boys would have a long day of paddling, and we'd talk about Jesus calming the storms, calming the seas. What a remarkable story. It's about life application. Favorite Bible stories, they go on and on. Ezekiel 36:4. Easy. So there's a story behind that. We were looking for a Bible verse to go with our troop numbers for our Trail Life troop. And our troop numbers had been assigned in scouting 23 years earlier. And I started searching and searching and searching and searching. And guess what? There are not that many books of the Bible that will have either enough enough chapters or enough verses to match 3:6:4. Well, Ezekiel does, and it's wonderful. Hear the word of the Lord. I have discovered that I grow most when I am studying to teach. That's the thing that works for me. I write a lot of daily devotionals. I do those for scout camps and trail life camps and places all across the country today. Drop me notes and say, hey, would you write a devotional series for us for our week that we're going to be spending at camp? And it's always a time of reflection. It's like, well, what's the main focus? What's your theme of the camp? And let me structure this to be something that the boys can do every morning on their own before they ever get started with their day. Biggest paycheck I've ever gotten out of my trail life experience was a day when it had been so rainy and the mud was up to your knees. It was terrible. And I got out of my tent and just could barely move, and I got a half mile to walk. At every campsite I walked by, I saw boys sitting around their campfire trying to shelter from the rain, doing their morning devotionals. Powerful. It's great to see. He has always been a part of my life. There was a time when I was in, as I said, what would be middle school today, where I was not particularly close with the fellowship of the youth group in particular. But then I began to recognize that I needed to get over that, right? And so while I was in college, I began to become more engaged, and that has grown consistently ever since. One of our pastors years ago became a really great friend. It was Rob Schneider. And Rob is over at Edwardsville Calvary Baptist today. It's been there for, 25 years now. But Rob started a class called the Mathetai class, and it was the learners class. And it was before I ever became involved as a deacon. And guess what? That was powerful, and it brought me to a desire to study the scriptures. And so that's what happened. Tell me the stories of Jesus. That's the very favorite. It's an old song, and it is, tell me the stories of Jesus. The song I love to hear. You want to hear all of the verses, but it's one of those things that you hear as a child and it sticks with you as an adult. And I won't sing it. Count yourself lucky. They don't even let me sing in children's church. So, it's a good thing. Find a mentor. Find a mentor immediately. You need someone who is going to guide you, to give you good, strong foundations. They'll walk you through those principles that guide us as Southern Baptists. Today, in the class that I teach, Chi Alpha, it's Christ First, that's what that is. We talk a lot about Baptist faith and message. We talk about the fundamentals of why it matters to mentor others. We just finished a series in the Forge Bible study, and that was so excellent because we begin with a little bit of mentoring to bring a person from being a friend or someone you just know to the point where they're comfortable asking you questions. If they become a Christian, that's when you can really begin the discipleship, and you can begin to really pour into them and give them those foundations and give them an accountability partner.